Good morning, everybody. Everything new under the sun. I want to take a look at an article today on Zero Hedge, and it relates to the next big event that could be coming. Now, you may have heard of Event 201 exercise, and this was an exercise that happened in October 2019, and it simulated a global novel zoonotic coronavirus pandemic, supposedly spread from bats to people, that required a global lockdown. So this is an exercise that the World Economic Forum put on to get the world ready for what they saw coming in the future. And of course, coincidence happened, and come December, was it 2019? Even as early as November, there were things happening related to this. And so you have to ask the question, did they know something was coming? Well, I think the 7-year period maybe starts at the end of this year. I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But I want to take a look at some events which seem to be leading us there. I think the people in control are certainly using situations to their advantage and are trying to move the world in a certain direction. More control, more government control, a new world fiat currency system. They know the current world economic system can't stand up. Interesting that the World Economic Forum sponsored Event 201, which is about a pandemic. What does a pandemic have to do with the economies of the world? Outside of crashing them when they lock down the whole world, right? So let's take a look at this article because I think it's very interesting. So the title of this one is CyberPolygon. This is the next big thing, apparently. Will the next globalist war game lead to another convenient catastrophe? It says, almost every man-made catastrophe in the U.S. and in many parts of the world in the past couple of decades have been preceded by a government or globalist exercise. Now, you may see this as conspiracy theory, but this has been out for a long time, actually. This Event 201 is well publicized. And somehow they were predicting it. Somehow Fauci even predicted that during Trump's term in office, there may be some sort of big virus or pandemic come. So interesting. And of course, back then he had money in the pot of the Wuhan lab. Interesting stuff. It says these exercises and war games tend to mimic the exact disaster that would eventually strike the public only days or weeks later. Sometimes the mock disaster exercises and real events happen at the same time. So this next one is very interesting. Let's go on here. So Event 201 simulated a global zoonotic coronavirus pandemic. Almost every aspect of the COVID event has played out exactly as was practiced during the World Economic Forum, the WEF war game. One very disturbing element of the COVID response has been the coordinated suppression campaign by big tech platforms from YouTube to Facebook and Twitter. The campaign has sought to undermine or destroy any facts, data, and opinions, and the opinions especially is what I don't like, which run contrary to the government. There was a narrative, and the government was certainly pushing that. I think we all recognize that Fauci was pushing a narrative. Whether you like him or not, he was pushing a narrative. And whether you figure it was for nefarious purposes or not, he was certainly pushing a narrative, wearing the mask after he was vaccinated. And he came out and said, you know what, I didn't want to send mixed messages. Even though I was vaccinated, I still wore my mask, just, to look like a good public figure, I guess. It goes on here. It's almost as if they knew the coronavirus pandemic was about to happen. So coincidentally, they practiced this just before it came on the scene, months, a couple of weeks, a month later, interestingly. It goes on here. Keeps talking about the coronavirus. It's hard to ignore the timing, the strange coincidence of the high-level biohazard labs in Wuhan in favor of the idea that the virus was launched by chance due to the odd diets of central Chinese people who have been eating that way for, many, many thousands of years. Actually, the Chinese, as a people, are thousands of years old as a people group. It goes on and talks about that. But let's go on to the next thing. So the question is there an Event 201 upcoming that seems to or could predict, could preempt, or could predict what is coming next. And the answer is there is something interesting. Let's see. Let's scroll down here. So, Event 201 predicted 65 million dead people, and that didn't work. So the suggestion is that that didn't work. So they're working on something else. Well, there's a new one called CyberPolygon. Let's scroll down here. My biggest concern right now is the upcoming CyberPolygon exercise being headed by who? The World Economic Forum. Why are they involved in this? Why are they involved in cybersecurity? Shouldn't the militaries of the world be involved in this? No, the World Economic Forum is. Are they trying to reset something? Yeah, they want the world economy reset. They want a global currency. So the CyberPolygon exercise, which is happening in July next month, the war game is meant to simulate a cyber attack on vital infrastructure that would lead to a shutdown of the global supply chain, or at least the supply chains with certain nations. As I warned in April, the timing of CyberPolygon is suspicious, as the COVID lockdown agenda is breaking down in the U.S. and vaccine passports not winning the favor of a large percentage of Americans. The globalists, it says, will need another crisis, even if they hope to achieve their goals of the Great Reset. So they're pushing for the Great Reset, a grand utopia or awakening of the world, where the world comes together, comes under a world currency and a world government. There are guiding hands behind all the leaders, which seem to be pushing us in this direction. Interesting that this is happening in July, and this has been planned for a long time. Note that, of course, there were cyber attacks on the oil pipeline down the East Coast. The next thing was a cyber attack on JBS, ransomware attack on JBS, the beef producer in the U.S. I think 23% of the beef in the U.S. from JBS, and they were shut down. So CyberPolygon is all about ransomware and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, which again could take out the food supply. So we keep seeing basically attempts on our food supply, whether it be COVID, the lockdown, etc. It's significantly disrupting the food supply, causing inflation, causing all sorts of trouble. It goes on. Only weeks after I published my initial concerns about CyberPolygon, a massive cyber attack which struck a 5,500-mile colonial pipeline. The pipeline supplies gasoline to most of the eastern seaboard, and after a week of being shut down, numerous states were reporting gas shortages. The story since quietly faded from mainstream cycles. In the past few days, yet another major cyber attack has been reported on JBS, the meat company, 23%. There you go, of all U.S. beef and pork. JBS was shut down for a number of days. It goes on here. Let's see. Is it just a coincidence that these large-scale cyber attacks are happening with greater frequency? When was the last time you heard of a ransomware attack? It's been a little while since there's been a ransomware attack or significant cyber attack in the media. And within the last couple of weeks, we've had two very significant, affecting, 50% of the U.S. population, basically, who either live near the pipeline or are looking for meat, etc., pork and beef. It goes on. So these things are happening with greater frequency, or is CyberPolygon another Event 201? Is there a repeat here? This is interesting. We don't really recognize it the first time. It sounds like conspiracy theory the first time. But when it comes and it plays out exactly as the event seemed to predict, and shortly after the event, well, your ears should perk up then and recognize that maybe there's something else going on here, something more sinister, something planned. And it's hard to deny that. It's hard to look away from this and say, no, that's just conspiracy theory at this point. It says, or is CyberPolygon another Event 201, which was the pandemic? Is it a beta test for a disaster that is planned for the near future? The World Economic Forum is openly comparing future cyber attacks to COVID outbreaks. It goes on. The supply chain has come to the forefront in the wake of the pandemic. as retailers have had to deal with imminent intermittent shortages, and this is just going to put more strain and bankrupt more small companies, cause even more trouble in the supply chain, cause inflation to increase. Not only that, but inflationary troubles are also weighing on supplies. That said, a cyber attack is another animal entirely. Whether or not the event is real or staged, the supply chain is fragile because of global interdependency. In the US, there are many necessities that rely on foreign manufacturers, i.e., China. How much of our products come from China? A huge percentage of them. I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's got to be, 70% products, either in whole or part, come through China. China is just a massive manufacturing hub for all sorts of things, plastic things and just all sorts of cheap supplies that we're used to getting. Just a lot of manufacturers have shut down in North America because they can't pay the hourly wage, and China just has such cheap labor that most of manufacturing has moved over there. So this goes on here. I don't really know if the supply chain could be shut down completely using a cyber attack, but in combination with inflation and the pandemic restrictions, it is possible to disrupt the flow of goods for weeks at a time. It is also impossible to predict how many people are prepared for such a calamity. So again, the idea of being prepared, store up, just like Joseph did in the 7 good years for the 7 bad years. I think the 7 bad years are shortly coming upon us. We've been living in the 7 good years, relatively speaking. It's going to get way harder. And so you should have a pantry. You should have maybe some solar, a little bit of a way to recharge a cell phone, some ways to communicate with neighbors, get to know your neighbors, build some relationships. There's very easy things you can do. Plant a garden. Till up a spot in your garden so that you're ready should you need to start planting something. Remember, you can take potatoes out of your cupboard and chop them up, separate them, and you take the eyes of the chunks with the eyes of the potatoes in them, plant them in your garden, and they'll grow. One of the easier things to grow. And you can do that with pretty much a lot of your produce in your fridge. There's a lot of things you can grow like that. It says, if Event 201 is any indication, then we should remain vigilant and watch carefully for another major cyber attack affecting the supply chain within 2 months of the World Economic Forum's CyberPolygon exercise in July. So you heard it here, I think, based on history, and history repeats itself, based on Event 201, which occurred, predicting a global pandemic, which then came within a couple of weeks and or a month or two. It was coming out the end of 2019, and then the first cases really started hitting in January, February around the world. So if that's any indication, if history repeats itself, then this CyberPolygon thing could be a significant thing to watch. And if you need to get any products or items out of the supply chain, seeds, whatever it may be, get some chickens, if you need hardware and nuts and bolts, maybe pull those out of the supply chain right now. Pull those out of the stores right now and have some on hand if you need to repair anything. That's something we overlook. You may have a chainsaw, but do you have the ability to repair it? Do you have an extra spark plug? Do you have extra gas containers on hand for emergency purposes? Do you have bits and pieces, parts that you can get? And often you can look around your house and scavenge a lot of these things, but there may be things like maybe buy a box of wood screws, that may come in very, very short supply. Just like lumber has rocketed up in price for 2x4s from $1 a piece to, up near $10 a piece in Canada. Screws, boxes of screws may be going up hugely as well. There may be lumber around that you can use, but do you have a way to fasten it together? So you'll have to get inventive. And is this the next step in the pandemic? The pandemic didn't crash the world economy. Next thing is going to be CyberPolygon and a massive cyber attack. And it's already happened. They're already saying the Russians are hitting. The Russians were the ones to hit the pipeline. The Russians were the ones to hit JBS, the meat supplier and processor. And could that be happening then in July, August, September? Again, interestingly, in the lead up for the fall period, which is always a high watch period. And we have the Jewish New Year coming and just a lot of things happening. we're at the tipping point. We're very close. There's a lot of things happening right now, and a lot of things are gearing up. Just these 2 cyber attacks, and how many other cyber attacks are happening that you haven't even heard of yet. A lot of them go under the radar, and just because cyber attacks are happening all the time, but not so successful as these last couple. And when was the last time you heard about a significant cyber attack hitting the supply chains like this? I don't recall the last time a major one did. So, folks, be prepared, pay attention. The coming of the Lord, the return of the Lord is near. But I think there's going to be a lot of calamity, great trouble coming before that. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll leave it there, and we'll see you in the next video.